Good evening, everybody. We are very delighted to have with us Bob Archer as our first item on our agenda. He's going to talk about the Labour Tribunal that's being organised to support the sacked shop stewards at the Rossing Uranium Mine in Namibia. If you remember, Bob spoke to us about the dispute, which has been going on for 3 years now, where the Chinese company, a uranium company that moved in to take over the mine, immediately sacked the shop stewards and have been indulging in some very anti-trade union practices. And Bob did explain to us what was going on, and we had a very, very good meeting with him. Well, he's back today to talk about the Labour Tribunal that's being held now, is going ahead for these sacked shop stewards. So I'm really interested to hear about how this works. So, Bob, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you very much, and it's a real pleasure to be able to speak to you again. And I pick up where Carol really started. Well, the tactic of organising a labour tribunal, which is kind of a place where workers can come and express their grievances and see their grievances reflected in other workers' disputes, has really helped to, I think, take the struggle forward in Namibia. There are a number of groups of workers. It's not just the Rossing shop stewards. There is a record since liberation. There's been a real record of frustrated labour struggles in Namibia. And that's interesting because in the 1970s, under apartheid, when Namibia was a South African protectorate, a mandate, South African mandate, it was the trade unions who organised from the bottom upwards the biggest opposition to the whole system. And they organised it under conditions where there were contract labourers. They were sent from their home areas to far distant places to mine metal ores, to fish the very rich fisheries on the coast of Namibia. And they started by organising unions, and they were very effective. Since 1990, early 1990s, when Namibia became an independent state, under a kind of protective aegis of the European Union and a group of states who were sort of nannies, what do you call them, fairy godmothers. They came in with a brilliant constitution, and which very firmly affirmed people's rights. It affirmed rights at work. It talked about all the necessary rights to trade union action, compensation for injury at work, and all of that. The only trouble is, not much of it happens. Not much of it happens. There was a big struggle of TCL copper workers in the late 1990s, which led to, in fact, they closed the copper mine at Tsumeb underneath them. And then God blimey, the pension fund got stolen off them and was spirited away somewhere in South Africa. And there's still a struggle of those retired miners to get their pensions. And there was definitely legal chicanery between the state and the people, and in fact the leadership of the miners' union at that time. So that's an ongoing struggle in Namibia. It's not gone away because it's actually whole generations depend on those pensions. But that's just for example. I talked previously about the Rossing dispute, and I think comrades are fairly familiar with that. What I'd like to talk about is the fisheries dispute, because that's a very interesting one. There were about 4 years of all-out general strike by a group of fishermen on the west coast, on the Swakopmund, It's a very rich fishery. It has been for years. During the Second World War, the most fish we could get in England were the scrod that were caught on that coast. It's a major source of proteins and nutrition. And the rules are very clear. The rules concerning conditions for workers are very clear. The rules concerning overtime payments, overtime working at sea, all very clear, and all absolutely junked overboard by the companies that run the fishing there, and it completely ignored. And workers were in desperation over this. They tried to get somebody to come down from the government to talk to them, got nowhere. Turns out that most of the leading ministers are on the boards of directors of the fishery companies. So they've had a hell of a fight, and they've only recently, about a year ago, managed to get back to work. Not all of them, but enough of them to keep the union together, and they have a fisheries association. So that typifies most of the nature of labour relations in Namibia. Now, there's a very important further point to make. Some big fishery companies in Iceland, Japan, bribed the government to allow them to overfish, to go over the quota, and to really catch more fish than the thing could bear, which is disastrous for a fishing industry. Now, we're very pleased that the International Transport Workers Federation has got interested in this. And I was talking to an Irish official of the ITF on Friday last week, who is going to support this inquiry. He may not make it to it, but he'll take part in the inquiry online, because he has experience in West Africa, where there are crews, there are conditions in the fisheries that absolutely stand completely contrary, not only to the country's labour relations arrangements, but most of those countries have had aid and support from the European Union, and all of that has had clauses underlining workers' conditions, underlining union rights at work, and they're just completely broken. They are ignored. And the problem for workers is, what do you do about this? You can go to court, and you find that the judiciary in that country is as bent as the employment system. The latest, by the way, with Rossing, just to go back to Rossing, the workers there, they might have made a mistake in one way. They went to a Labour Tribunal to get their jobs back, and they got fobbed off. The manager, the company, kept saying no, they couldn't attend the tribunal. This is the official government tribunal, because of COVID or this and that and the bloody next thing. And before you knew it, they took out a case against the lawyer for the lawyer working on the workers' side. They tried to catch him on a case. They said he had caused the company a lot of damages, and they were seeking damages. They didn't realize that under Namibian law, there is no such thing as damages in an employment tribunal. But this shows what you're up against. And so there are these three basic groups of workers. There are many more miners, by the way. There are mines all over the place in Namibia. And there are big issues about the way that workers are treated. There are the fisheries workers, and there are the pensions question. Now, we have been scratching our heads for a long time how to bring these issues together and give them a profile in public life in Namibia. And it was some Americans, well, a South African and American, who are active on the west coast of America and with links with the seafarers' unions there, who said, well, look, it sounds like you need a labour tribunal. If the courts aren't going to back you up, it seems like you need a public place at which all these issues are brought together and become public. to make it resonate around the country. And this is indeed what they're doing. There's a big public room is booked for the 27th and the 28th of October, and people are preparing their submissions for that. And I sent 2 documents, I think, to Carol. I sent one with a statement from the Workers' Advice Centre about how they think the thing should go. And there's one from David Hemson, who puts forward 2 possible models of a questionnaire which could form the basis of the procedure of the tribunal. I should say David is a South African trade unionist who's been active since the late 60s, I think, and very active in organising trade unions under apartheid in South Africa. Very keen to put this forward. So that's where we're at. Groups of workers will attend this this tribunal and give evidence. And in fact, that's one of the things I wanted to raise. I've given some bank details to Carol in the hope that she could share them out. It's going to be costly for our comrades in Namibia. It's a massive country. And the idea of coming down from Tsumeb, there's nothing like public transport. They would have to hire some sort of vehicle to get there from the coast, from where the fisheries people are. It's several thousand kilometers away from Windhoek, to west of Windhoek. The miners are mainly to the north. There is a group of people from the south who have a lot of grievances that they want to raise in this context as well. And we could really use a bit of help for hiring transport and getting people to this thing and feeding them and looking after them while they're for a couple of days. But I'll stop there, and if there's anything else that I can bring in, pick away at it, and I'll try and answer questions.
Thank you very much, Bob. I didn't realize it was not just the uranium mine workers that were involved. This is involving the fisheries, involving a whole load of other mines as well. It sounds as if there's such corruption, obviously, at governmental level. I mean, this seems like an impossible situation for these workers, which is why I guess the American comrade has suggested this Labour Tribunal. What can I ask? What kind of teeth will this tribunal have to actually win a case for these workers?
Well, it won't have any legally recognised basis, but it can create a profile publicly that lots of people in Namibia will recognise. They'll see themselves reflected in what these workers say, and that's basically how workers' movements develop. As a class, it's when workers see themselves reflected in others, that's believe me, it's been a battle, and we're very pleased that David and Steve Seltzer came up with this proposal. To me, it's like the miners in England. In the 1830s, if you read Engels's book on the condition of the working class, he discusses how the miners' union got organised, because they got together in the northeast. It was the miners there who got together and formulated a selection of demands over a period of, it was over several years actually, but that was how Engels described the development of working class consciousness at that stage. You needed to gather a set of grievances in which everybody could see themselves reflected.
So it's really building solidarity between the unions, etc., etc. I've got Tim's got his hand up. I'm going to bring Tim in now. He's obviously got a question for you.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, Tim.
Thank you very much, Bob, for your presentation. I'd just like to say I'm interested that while clearly the Chinese are the villains of the piece at the Rossing mine, that is not the case with the fisheries companies.
No.
Am I right?
Well, Japan,
Yes.
Iceland, De Beers is a big issue in Namibia because
Wow.
they have a grip, they have monopolies on the gems and precious stones. Absolutely, no, it's not. I just got to say, there is quite a big Chinese population in Windhoek. They're people. They live in the same areas as the Namibian workers. They get on with each other. It's just we observed that in employment circumstances, Chinese workers are very severely oppressed by their employers. But that's not against the people of China, who are as welcome there as they are, as anybody else would be. And there is no favoritism between imperialists. They get exploited by everybody.
Gosh, that's so these Chinese workers are very oppressed by their company.
Own employers. Yes, they work hard. They're expect the Namibian workers observe. I mean, they lived under the Germans, so they know a bit about oppression. They observed that a number of Chinese companies, for example, have won the contracts to build roads in Namibia. And there are a lot of complaints about this. The Namibian engineers are very critical of the workmanship, but they note that Chinese workers are expected to carry loads, and they're quite frail compared to Namibians, are great big hulking people. And they see these Chinese guys carrying loads that they would take several of them to lift up. So this gets seen and noted, you know.
I'm quite interested in your just want to add spotlight here. I'm quite interested in the fact that these Namibian engineers aren't happy with the actual construction construction methods that are being employed by the Chinese. That's very worrying too. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, there are. It's a country which has standards. I don't know if the word Deutsche Industrienorm resonates with you, but it's the German version of industrial standards, you know, the kite mark, whatever. So Namibian engineers construct roads to German standards. You know, there's in terms of the underlayer, then the middle layer, then the coating, the degree of camber, how thick the asphalt layer is, how the drainage is. And they're very critical of some of the roads. But roads are very important in Namibia because there's no other way of getting from place to place. Look, another example, this corruption takes place. Precious stones. There is an inspectorate that makes sure that every precious stone and gemstone that's mined is exported properly, and that the books are kept. There is currently a lady who runs one branch of the inspectorate who's been sacked and victimized for doing her job because her employers, the government, have been told to get her to lay off because she's too good at it, and the Diamond Corp, you know, the people that market the diamonds aren't getting away with as much as they want. That's a really typical example of public life in Namibia.
Oh my goodness! As any, I can't. Please put your hand up. You got any more questions for Bob? Could you please put your hand up so that I can bring you in? Now, anybody would like to make any other questions? Steve, could you put your video on, Steve, so that I can spotlight you? Oh, thank you.
Okay, good.
Well, this is Steve Seltzer from San Francisco, and I'm involved in supporting the brothers and sisters in Namibia. And I think it needs to have international attention in the labor movement, because what is going on, not just in Namibia, but South Africa and other countries, is basically the recolonization of these countries. They're being recolonized, and what they're doing is they're kicking out workers, regular workers who have union contracts, have seniority, and bringing in contract workers. And this privatization, massive privatization in South Africa, has led to imposition of contract labor now, temporary work. And that's exactly what's going on in Namibia, where Chinese and other companies, Icelandic companies, are basically bought all the resources. It's been sold out by SWAPO, the ruling party. They've taken bribes. There's a video called Fish Rot. It's on Al Jazeera. They got the information from WikiLeaks about payoffs. The Minister of Justice and the Minister of the Fisheries were given bribes, and they showed them taking bribes to give away fishing licenses, to the Icelandic fishing company. And so in any event, I mean, this destruction of the country, the looting of the country, has led also to the corruption in the judicial system and the labor system. They've been captured by these companies, and that's why we have a situation in Rossing where Hewett Bukes is being sued, the lawyer, to retaliate against him for defending not just workers at Rossing, but other workers, the fishermen he helped, and other workers in housing, were people in the communities that had housing, lost them because of corruption by union officials who were taking money, and grabbing the housing that should have been for the workers. So in any event, I mean, we're trying to bring it up in the United States. We've got the San Francisco Labor Council to pass a resolution. But I think what is necessary is for the Namibian workers and people to come together in a national event and to talk about what's going on, to report on what's going on, and to show the records and the documentation of this the situation they're facing, so we can get that on internationally. Now, the Industrial wrote an article 3 years ago about the firing and about the attack, but there's been nothing further. And we think these international unions have a responsibility to take up this case. If workers don't have any kind of legal redress, they're starved out. It's over 3 years now that they've been without a work. Where does that leave the working class? And that's what we're talking about. Workers have a right to redress, and they have a right to human and labor rights. And I think that the government has adopted the Chinese view. It's got socialism with Namibian characteristics, like the Chinese have socialism with Chinese characteristics. Well, the Namibians have the same, but it has meant to sell out of the country. In fact, even the road construction, the Germans were going to give reparations because Namibia used to be a colony of Germany, and there's a fight for reparations. Apparently, they said we're going to give 300 euros for road construction, and then the contracts have been written so that only Chinese companies can get the contracts for road construction in Namibia. So workers, I mean, the idea that you have to bring in Chinese workers to replace Namibian workers is really an outrage. And I know Chinese companies around the world bring in Chinese workers. They did it in Canada, actually, to a mine, as if Canadian miners can't do the work. There's a high level of unemployment in Southern Africa and Namibia. Why bring in workers from other countries to do work that workers there can do? This is another issue. And it's a very dangerous situation because it can lead to xenophobia. It can lead to racism. But as we believe, I mean, the human rights, not just of the Namibian workers, but Chinese workers are also in question. Because a lot of these Chinese workers, their passports are taken away. They don't have rights, and they're subjugated to worse conditions. In fact, one of the things I discovered in interviewing these workers on labor video is that the conditions of the Chinese workers were worse than the Namibian workers. The Chinese workers were working 10 hours, 12 hours a day. They had worse conditions than the Namibian workers. And what they wanted from the leadership of the Rossing mine, that branch, they wanted them to cut back on their healthcare conditions, benefits. They wanted to attack the very conditions that they'd won over many years. They refused to do it. They tried to bribe them, and then they fired the entire branch leadership. So we're talking about the destruction of the union movement. And not only that, another worker, so after they were fired, another worker ran for union office. He won as president, and then he was fired on a trumped up charge. So here we have a situation which basically the company, Chinese National Nuclear Corporation, says, we are not going to accept a union because we want to contract out. So what is happening now at the mine is that the company, Chinese National Nuclear Corporation, has hired a contractor. They're laying off 400 workers, and they're hired a contractor to bring back contract workers. So they're literally destroying any stability of these workers, any union rights that they would have by bringing in contract workers at a mine that used to be 100% union. So that's what we're talking about. It's a blatant union busting attack, and these workers are going to be speaking about on the 27th. I think it's important that British unions, American unions, all unions worldwide focus in on this and give them the solidarity and support they need.
Well said.
Thank you very much, Steve. Really valuable contribution there. This is the way that neoliberalism works, isn't it? We're seeing it in the UK. We're seeing the agency workers coming in to the NHS, to the schools.
Seafaring.
The same.
In fact, there's a strike now of 75,000 Kaiser workers all over the United States. Kaiser is in California has 9.4 million under the HMO, and they don't have safe staffing. I myself was pushed out of the hospital. I didn't even have time to change, and they pushed me out the hospital, and they said, your room is being used. So, I mean, this is the kind of conditions at this HMO. These workers are stressed out. They're burned out. They're not even making $25 an hour minimum wage. And now they want to contract out their jobs. And guess what? Kaiser wants to privatize your health system, in Britain. So this is where their money is going. They make profit in the United States, and then they want to go to England and privatize your health system and do wonderful things like what they've done in the United States with the health system here. I mean, it's an international struggle. And I think, again, the unity of workers, education of workers about the fight against privatization and contracting out is an international struggle.
I'm so glad you said that, Steve. It is an international struggle. And we've really, I think here in England, we've really got to reach out to meetings like this and see the struggle that's going on in other countries is the same as ours, and that we do need to work together. Mike's got his hand up. Mike?
Yeah, it was just a very quick point back to Steve with regard to Kaiser Permanente. Their whole model of what is called in the States accountable care is what has been imported into the NHS under the guise of so-called integrated care. It is anything but integrated. And when they say accountable, they mean accountable to the accountant, not to the service users. It is anything but accountable to ordinary people. And this has been, we have been conned into believing that these integrated care systems within the NHS, which have now gone live, and there are 44 of them around the country, represent some sort of forward step. It is an American-based insurance model coming from Kaiser Permanente, the very same people who are doing this to their own workforce, which I've been reading a little bit about, Steve. So some news of that has filtered over here.
Well, they don't provide
it just sort of emphasizes the point that these struggles in this era, all of these struggles have an international dimension. We cannot fail but be internationalists.
Absolutely. Very well said, Mike. Steve, do you want to come back in there?
Well, I was just going to say, one of the things about media, and we have like a Zoom right now, and we've had the miners on our Zoom, and is that you could have Kaiser workers giving reports to British workers about this fight in Kaiser to give a lie, show the fraud, the propaganda of that what Kaiser is doing is better. They refuse to provide mental health care in a prompt way. People commit suicide. because they can't get mental health care. I mean, they're criminal activities by these executives. And I think these struggles are international. And one of the tasks that we need is to link them up directly internationally. Kaiser workers could be, I mean, having an event in Britain about privatization in Kaiser.
Yes, they could.
And then would be very valuable for the Kaiser workers to give a report. I did a video, I can send it to Bob, and I can't put it on right now, about the Kaiser workers and talk about the situation, the stressed out, the burnout, the dangerous conditions for the workers and the patients, because patients are not getting proper care, prompt care. They can't get appointments. I mean, it's chaos, total chaos.
I would absolutely love to do that, Steve. If you send it to me, I'll get it right round Redbridge Trades Council and the health campaigners in my bit of East London, and see where we get from there.
Well, we really need an international labor channel that can have struggles around the world and tie these struggles together. We are an international working class, and for the first time in history, we have a communication technology that allows to have simultaneous communication of workers around the world, and we need to use that as long as we can. I know there's a censorship effort, particularly around Palestine, that is going on, but in any event, I mean, I think these struggles are international, and in the case of Kaiser, they're right in the middle of privatizing the British health system. So a campaign by the unions, the health worker unions, the public unions in Britain to publicize the Kaiser strike would be very valuable. This is the result of what you're going to get with Kaiser running your healthcare system.
We'd love to do something like that. Bob, if we could get together with you, and that's so important. Our National Health Service is being absolutely privatized, attacked. The American healthcare corporations want it. They know how much money they can make from it, and they're on the boards of all those integrated care system boards now. It's been an absolute planned attack from way back.
Maybe what you could do is have a protest at the Kaiser headquarters in London.
Absolutely.
Stop killing patients in solidarity with the Kaiser workers in the United States, and have a press conference out there. Bring a Kaiser worker to protest. You're destroying healthcare in the United States, and now you wanted to do it to Britain. I mean, that could get some traction. That's Kaiser for union busting and destroying the healthcare system.
Yeah. Brilliant idea. Mike, I see your hands up again.
Yeah, sorry, just another quickie about, indeed, we're not talking about just Kaiser with regard to the NHS, because NHS data has already given contracts contracts have already been given to handle NHS data to the extremely dodgy Palantir corporation, which is run by Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is one of the supporters of Donald Trump, and Palantir, despite its lovely Lord of the Ringsy associations in the name, actually has, think about what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians this minute. The Palantir has helped the Israeli state design surveillance systems against Palestinians. Palantir is an entirely malign force, and they are poised to win another big data contract for the NHS at the moment. We really can, by making a noise about this, just the government doesn't want to talk about it. Surprise, surprise. Of course they don't.
Well, I think, Peter Thiel wants a coup. He supported the coup, the attempted coup of Trump. He's a fascist, and he wants a different form of government. So this information is not getting out to the working class about who these people are. It's very dangerous, because they're the richest people in the world, Musk and Thiel and these people, and they are intent on, maintaining their power in the United States with a dictatorship. They're looking to have a dictatorship. They don't want to have democratic rule. In fact, the crisis in the Congress is they don't want a Congress. They don't want any kind of constitutional procedures. They want to operate autocratically. So it's a question of democracy and and a threat to any kind of democratic rights. And I think that the attempted coup and insurrection was to crush the working class and to set up a very reactionary clique in power. And Peter Thiel was one of those. So there has to be an international campaign. And the labor movement would be educating people about who these people are, to put the government on the defensive. Who are these people that are going to take control of the British healthcare system? What's their record around the world? Peter Thiel has a reactionary record, and I think that has to be brought to the attention of the working class. But I think right now, I mean, in relationship to the Kaiser, having an action at the Kaiser office in London and a solidarity rally and videotape that, and then we can get it to Kaiser workers here. This is an international struggle.
That's a brilliant idea, Steve. I'm going to bring Jennifer in now. She's got her hand up. Jennifer?
Thank you. I'm not sure I've got a lot to add to this debate, except yes, please, let's do something. I've been campaigning for the NHS for years, and the thing that it's impossible to do is to convince people that the NHS is being stolen and has been over a long period of years. And they simply will not believe it because they've still been going to the doctor, and they've still, until relatively recently, been getting into hospital. And it hasn't cost them anything until recently, when charges are starting to be introduced. So it's impossible to persuade them. It's also, as you all know, been an incredibly complex process that Simon Stevens started, and he kept changing the names of things as well. So if you try to explain anything to anybody, it would be accountable care. And then, as we know, it changed to integrated care. And I think there were other names in between as well. So it was shifting sands all the time. And you couldn't get people to take on board a very complex argument when, to them, the service hadn't apparently changed. And I don't know how we address that. When, in addition, we haven't had an opposition for many years. So we haven't got anybody who is putting an alternative narrative to the one that the ruling party is putting out. And so it's almost impossible for campaigners to get the message out. So, yes, whatever we can do, please, let's publicise it. Well, let's get unions to understand, and let's get the unions all together. I want to bottle Steve Seltzer as an essence that we can spread everywhere to get people to understand.
I'm willing to do that. But there are two things. So having an action at the Kaiser offices in London in solidarity with the Kaiser workers, and then bringing over have a Kaiser worker call in to the rally by phone about their struggle here. That's a possibility. Direct solidarity with British and U.S. workers. The other thing is, you can't maybe go to Namibia on the 27th, but you can have a lobby or rally at the Namibian consulate in London in solidarity with them. That would be very important. I mean, an International Day of Action on Namibia about what's going on. That would help out the Namibians if some direct action took place in London, and get unions to come and speakers and videotape it. Videotape the speeches in front of the Namibian consulate and deliver a letter to the Namibian government. Follow your own laws. Why are you allowing a destruction of labor law and your constitution as far as the rights of workers and the people of Namibia? So if you could do that on the 27th, I mean, that would be a direct help to them.
Great to have such passion and great ideas for things to happen. Thank you so much. John, I'm just bringing John in. Someone's got his hand up. John?
Yeah, there we go. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, very interesting. I've been part of a campaign to save the NHS for the last 20 years. Sussex defend the NHS. And as Jennifer says, it's very difficult to convince people that it's actually been privatised. and all other things that happen to it. So we need, as speakers were saying, I mean, our Trades Council, along with our campaigning group, we always work together. And we've been quite active. I mean, we have actually done sit-ins in councils and in the various meetings and so on. And we had won, a few campaigns. As we know, the language always changes and people are just confused as to exactly what is happening. The restructures are endless. And as we know, at this time, we've got our junior doctors and our consultants out on strike. Just the other day, I was down the picket line. So this is becoming just, terrible. Absolutely terrible what's going on in the national service. So yeah, if you could send me, I'm particularly interested in what's going on in the States, because as one of the speakers talked about Palantir, and we've been aware of that. So the more information we can get and the more information we can exchange, we are affiliated to the Keep the NHS Public England, which has various groups, throughout the country. So yeah, if you could, or Carol or someone, send us something, and I'll see what I can do with it.
Very good.
But it's absolutely necessary that people know that the privatisation is taking place and that the United States, are a big player in this. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, John. Yes, we're coming up with some really good ideas.
Well, again, I mean, direct solidarity by worker to worker and union to union is important. And if you could get the healthcare workers union to join this action at the Kaiser office in London, that could get international news. You could stream it live. You could actually stream it live to the United States, and we could let the Kaiser workers know about it. Don't do to us what you're doing to the American workers, the American healthcare system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mike's got.
And then it could show what these people are. I mean, these people don't care if people die. I mean, Kaiser has $44 billion as funds, extra funds, and they don't even pay a minimum wage of $25 an hour, which the union is demanding. So workers have to work 2 or 3 jobs at Kaiser. So they're stressed out. I mean, I interviewed them, and I'll show it. I mean, it's outrageous. I mean, you're having people who can't survive on the wage they make at Kaiser, so they have to go to other jobs, gig work. You're talking about gig workers, and it's the same at UPS. These companies, UAW, are making billions and billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're not paying a living wage. That's why there's a strike wave in the United States, which is going to grow, of millions of workers, and people are just fed up. They've had enough.
Yes, Mike, can you go ahead now?
Just trying to bring some of these strands together about health unions, international links, and so on. One of the problems we have, Steve, I'm sure you can observe it, and you have some similar problems with the right wing, the dominant wing of the Democratic Party in the States. But certainly here, many of the health unions are very tied to the Labour Party. And as Bob just put in chat, Wes Streeting, who's the shadow health secretary, he's the one who will take over when the Tories are booted out. He has already said that he intends to continue and, if possible, even intensify the involvement of the private sector in the NHS. So the leadership of unions like Unison who are very kind of malleable to the leadership of the Labour Party. Some of the leadership of the other unions less so, but Unison is the dominant health workers union. Not the BMA. They certainly aren't flavour of the month with either government or opposition, nor indeed the Royal College of Nursing, who had a very courageous strike, or certainly their membership has been very courageous. But Unison is likely to try and tell its members not to do anything that will embarrass the electoral chances of the Labour Party. And the links, there's something in Open Democracy today about right-wing think tanks getting their claws deeper into the Labour Party. As we know, again, these are international in scope. The Heritage Foundation that you have, Steve, is very much linked to some of the right-wing think tanks that the remarkable and ridiculous Liz Truss was involved with, or is involved with, here in this country. So there is likely to be really, a degree of political unanimity about this, which we are going to have to confront and shatter. And it's going to be really difficult.
Well, I mean, it is, one of the problems ideologically is that the trade union in the United States, the leadership, support capitalism, openly support capitalism and imperialism. They support Israel. They support U.S. imperialism. There's no opposition by the U.S. union leadership to the trillions of dollars the United States is spending on war. But in relationship to social services and public services, the unions have supported nonprofits, and also they support charters. The AFT, the teachers union, both teachers union, NEA and AFT, support charters, which is undermining public schools. They're basically setting up a two-tier education system, public schools and charter schools run by private capitalists. So, and the struggle of nonprofits are being used to siphon off public workers in San Francisco. They're setting up like a parallel health system, Health Right 360, which does everything the public health system does, but the workers there are paid 30-40% less without the protections of being public workers. So, and the union is supporting this. So there has to be a struggle inside the unions against basically the capitalist agenda, which is to privatize public services, to outsource to nonprofits and other entities. So that's a political struggle inside the unions and against the union bureaucracy, which has been bought into this. In San Francisco, they're closing Laguna Honda Hospital, a public hospital. They're pushing people into private care centers. And the unions have supported HMOs. In fact, the healthcare workers unions do not want public health care. They are opposed a public health care plan in California and support Kaiser. They're basically controlled by Kaiser management, and they have a labor management partnership that says we're in partnership with the Kaiser management. That's the ideology of the union leadership here. But it's running into some rough spots because the management of Kaiser now is saying we want to, first they outsourced the bus drivers that delivered patients and workers. That was in 2019. And then they outsourced the dialysis centers, Kaiser, to private companies where they didn't have proper treatment. So Kaiser members had to go to these privatized healthcare centers outside Kaiser. And now they want to outsource cleaning and everything else in the hospitals. So they're basically privatizing the hospitals by outsourcing. And there has to be a political education campaign about that, what it means to the working class. So your problems are the same as our problems. And that's why having an connection and having direct solidarity, direct connection is the only way we're going to fight this successfully. I mean, what's going on in Namibia is the same as what's happening here, privatization. And basically all their resources are being captured by corporations. So there's no public sector.
Steve just made the scales fall from my eyes, and it's about academization of our schools, which is exactly what he's describing. And we've already let it happen, and it's there in place. They've taken over our schools with all the land and all the assets, and they take money from the government to run these schools, and they have total control over the conditions of the working conditions of the people who work in them. and they pay their executives vastly inflated sums of money while starving the schools. And I may say, applying a very right-wing curriculum and a very right-wing approach to things like discipline and pastoral care and so on. So it's happened, and I hate it. It's very, very worrying, very disturbing stories coming out about that. And I've put in the chat that we should be worried about right-wing organisations like the Adam Smith Institute, which is now actively targeting the Labour Party. And they will be accepted by the Labour Party, won't they? And I think the Adam Smith Institute is another one of the Tufton Street mob. They have various names, but it's another set of that group. So yes, thanks, Steve, for helping me make that connection. We have to worry about the increasing privatisation of all our public institutions. I mean, universities are already businesses, so we've lost them. And so it goes on. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jennifer. Yes, I mean, the academisation that we've had in England has been horrific. They immediately cut costs by cutting down the SEN care. They do horrific things to children with behavioural problems. They put them in isolation, but in booths in the front of the school so everyone can see them as they walk past. I know that for a fact in the northeast of England that's been happening. These academies.
Well, that's for charter schools, private schools, privatization. There is no national campaign against privatization of education by the education unions in the United States. No national campaign. Okay. The national unions are supporting charter schools in the United States.
So the unions, can I just get this clear then, Steve? How long has these charter schools, how long has it been happening in the States?
Years.
I knew nothing about it.
Decades. It's a long-range project.
Look,
they started about the same time as academisation in England as well. Right, okay. I didn't realise I didn't know that, and I'm in the
same people. The same people are involved in it. The same people. In fact, you have privatizers who are from the stock market. Goldman Sachs in England, the guy that actually helped lead off the collapse in 2008, left Goldman Sachs, came to the United States, and set up a charter school here in the Bay Area. So this is an international struggle. It's not just in Britain. It's not just in the United States. It's an international struggle. There is no international campaign against privatization because the union leadership in the United States have been supporting privatization. How could it be that the SEIU, the largest union in the United States, one of the largest unions of healthcare workers, is not fighting privatization, is not supporting national healthcare? How could that be?
Well, this is extremely interesting because as a former teacher and a member of the National Education Union, I had no idea that exactly the same thing was going on in the States.
Well,
so that's a whole other meeting that we have as well, because I didn't realise that. This has been really interesting. Wow. Can I just bring Paul? I have two more hands up. John, I don't think we can give John a third bite of the cherry, as it were, but Paul Collins, I'm going to bring Paul in.
Well, I think what makes the academisation so sinister, if I understood it right, obviously you got in this country, I'm talking about Britain specifically, you got state schools and then you got private schools, which we call public schools, but they are private schools. But the academisations are in fact state schools, but they allow private companies to come in and run it. But it's state money that's paying for it, isn't it? I don't. So I wanted to make that distinction. If it helps anyone, I don't know if it does, but correct me if I'm wrong. But that's my understanding of what's going on.
Yes, correct.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, Paul. Very well made. That what we're talking about are public schools that are being taken over and privatized. Of course, we've always had private schools in England, and in the States, of course, as well. There's always been private schools. What we're talking about, of course, is state schools, public schools being taken over and privatized, and that's where the real danger is. I'd like to see the end of private schools altogether, of course. I mean, that's the driver for the class system in England is, of course, the public school system. We call it private schools are called public schools, of course. But we've got places like Eton and Harrow and Winchester, etc., Sherborne, and so on. So we've always had private schools, but we're talking about this takeover of the state schools by the private sector. But I would love to see all private. I would like to see it as it is in Finland, where it is illegal to charge for education, and they have one of the best education systems in the world. And that's what I would love to see happen in the UK and in the USA, Steve.
Well, I mean, the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party and the union bureaucracy is embedded in the Democratic Party. In fact, in California, Gavin Newsom just appointed this ex-president of SEIU 2015. These are home care workers. It's the largest local, 425,000 home care workers, to be a U.S. senator. She left the union and she was supporting Kamala Harris, and then she went to work for Uber and Lyft, opposing a ballot proposition that would take away, that would allow Uber and Lyft drivers to get unemployment, Social Security, and workers' compensation. So she went to work for Uber and Lyft, and then she went to work for Airbnb. And then she became part of Emily, this Democratic Party machine that gives money to women. And now she's been appointed to be senator. So people are asking, who is she? Who is this union official? And these SEIU are supporting her. The national SEIU leadership are supporting her. She supports the SEIU leadership. So the embedding of the union bureaucracy into the Democratic Party is massive in the United States. They're one of the same. So, I mean, you can't fight capitalism and you can't fight privatization if your union leadership are supporting openly, and they do it openly. They support charter schools. They say, well, charter schools. I mean, Albert Shanker, who was one of the leaders of the AFT, supported charters and saying that they would make things more efficient, or they'd make better, or they'd be run by unions and community. Well, it was taken by the capitalists to as a Trojan horse to bring in privatized charter education. And this recent strike, the writers and the actors, one of the people they're fighting is Reed Hastings, who's owner of Netflix. And he was a privatizer of charters. He was head of the California Charter School Association. And also he was appointed by a governor of Democratic to be head of the Board of Education in California, State Board of Education. So you have these privatizers who are appointed to government positions to bring in privatization of public education. And there's no political education campaign. You have to educate people about who these are.
Yes.
It's like Kaiser. You need a campaign against Kaiser, and now is the time to do it. When there's a strike at Kaiser, when you can explain to people, this is what Kaiser's doing, and this is what they want to do to the people of Britain. That's what unions should be doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this is so important that we know these things. I mean, here I am, the teacher, any of you didn't even realize that, and that you're fighting exactly the same battles as we are. This is so.
Well, we put an initiative on the ballot. We tried to get an initiative on the California ballot to ban charter schools, to basically fold. If you're going to be a charter, run like a charter school, you have to be folded into the public school system. It wouldn't have destroyed it. It said you have to be part of a democratic structure, a state structure. So we started to get signatures to this petition. Teachers did not even know what a charter school was. You have to explain to them what a charter school was. The reason is that the union leadership has bought into charters. They didn't explain to their own members what charters were. And this guy, Reed Hastings, is a billionaire who wants to do this. He brought in computerization in schools. He wants to get rid of teachers, to bring in software. They want to use software to to make money, to make profit off of software, but also to spy on students, to use software to get information from students. Google now, teachers can do all their programs on work on Google. Who has that information? Google has that information. It's a privatization of our life through these tech companies and through digitalization. And what they're trying to do with AI now is destroy the jobs of actors and writers. And Reed Hastings, who owns Netflix, they didn't want any control of AI. That's another major issue. Goldman Sachs said 350 million workers are going to lose their jobs as a result of AI. Like the Industrial Revolution, they're going to get rid of all kinds of workers. Now, the question of AI is not that we're against artificial intelligence and robotics. Who's going to benefit and who owns it? And under capitalism, the capitalists are going to use it massively, and they're doing it in San Francisco. They have these robo taxis in San Francisco where they're dangerous, running wild. They don't follow the vehicle code, and the Democrats are allowing them to operate. Hundreds of these taxis, robo taxis, they're dangerous, and they're going to get rid of millions of drivers. In fact, Governor Newsom just vetoed a bill, AB 316, which required that if a truck was over 10,000 pounds, you have to have a driver. And he vetoed the bill. And the Teamsters, you shouldn't do this, and we're going to, you better not do this. His attitude is screw you. You have to bring 100, 200,000 workers to rally to get, to show we're going to mobilize. But see, mobilizing the workers is a dangerous thing because workers are so angry right now. If you mobilize 100 or 200,000 workers or 500,000 workers, it could get out of hand as far as they're concerned, the union bureaucracy. So there have been no mass demonstrations. But what you have now is with the UAW strike and other struggles, workers are beginning to see that it's not just about them, it's not just about their union, it's not just about their industry. It really is about the system. It's the capitalist system which is destroying them. And we need a workers' movement to fight a system. We need a working class movement and a working class party to fight the system. So we have a political alternative. That's the great danger in the United States. I mean, imagine a new, Biden and Trump. That's the choice we have in the United States. In the midst of what's happening, that's a great political vacuum. But I think education, particularly using technology to get information out, is very powerful. We can show. I mean, if you were able to connect the Kaiser struggle here with their fight against privatization in the NHS, that would be a big development.
Right. Well, I think I didn't realize this would turn into such an interesting and important debate that we've had. But I'm looking at the time now. We're now well in over an hour in our meeting. It's been brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I don't think we won't have time for the discussion that I'd planned after this at all. I think this one's been much more important. So I've got 3 more hands up. Can I ask? I think we're just going to keep it to this particular section. I don't think we should try and do any more apart from passing the minutes of the previous meeting. I'm going to can I ask the people who've got their hands up? It's John and Jennifer and Paul. Can I ask you just to keep it very, very brief, please? If you can keep it to 2 minutes, that would be great. So John and Jennifer and Paul. John.
Hi again. Steve, the United States is huge. I mean, it's such a huge country, and to have a situation where these charter schools, it's just beyond belief, because it's the whole privatisation, of public education, in such a huge country. We're a much smaller country. As Bob was saying, we definitely had battles here on academisation. We still are. I think, as far as I know, only one has managed to actually become an academy. But
no, the majority of British schools are now owned and run by academies.
Yes. Yeah, the majority, but I think most of ours aren't.
Most British schools are now academy schools, John.
Okay, I'll go with that. Yeah. All I'm saying is that I know that in Sussex there was a lot of battles, and I was involved in a bit. So, but yeah, what's going on in the States is really worrying. The other issue about academies is that it breaks down terms and conditions as such, for those who work in there, because you haven't got national bargaining as such. Is that right, Bob? I don't think they're part of the national bargaining, but they can change conditions as such, can't they?
Well, they can't divide. They can't go too far from the Burgundy Book and the Blue Book.
Right.
Those are teachers' terms and conditions. All teachers are employed under teachers' terms and conditions.
Yeah.
But they can work very differently. And they work very differently with the children.
And of course, they're given a financial priority by the government. And we know there's been many surveys now that have more or less said that academies are no better than normal public schools. And public schools haven't been financially helped in the same way academies have, by the government. The other thing is, of course, all our schools now are falling apart. And my understanding is that if we've built any school in the future under this government, it has to, and probably be under Starmer too, it has to be an academy. So
yes.
Whatever schools are falling apart, whether that, if they're not academies, if it's so bad, then any school that's built has to be an academy.
No, any new school that's built that didn't exist beforehand.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, a new school. Yeah. So so there's all those factors, and I totally agree with Steve. I think we can begin to see the beginnings of a movement in the United States. And then there's this guy who started the People's Party. Forgotten his name now, but he's very left.
I'll ask you to wrap up now, please, John.
Yeah, sorry. So that's it, really. Yeah. Cheers.
Very much, John. Jennifer.
I'm thinking we ain't seen nothing yet because Freeports are the next thing barreling towards us down the line. And that's going to be a complete free-for-all in terms of workers' rights and so on. It'll be another land grab. I mean, one of the things that worries me is that land and resources is progressively moving from the public sector into the private sector. We're seeing it happening in all sorts of ways. Every time a hospital goes into the private sector, then we lose land. We lost masses of land with water privatisation. We're losing more land, I think, in our cities that think they're doing a great job by inviting in big business and parceling up land for them at attractive rates and so on, but it's not serving the local people. So we have to think more about local democracy. But I do love the idea of this international dimension, because what we need is a shake-up about what trade unions are for, because for me, education has to be a fundamental part of their role, and I think they're falling down on it. They are not informing their members. Absolutely. And that's been the problem in the health sector, where the nurses union and the BMA and so on just didn't tell people what was going on. And you can still find, I spoke to nurses in my local practice who had not got a clue about what was being done to their NHS. They have not had any communications from their unions at all. So we have a massive campaign of information to undertake with the, hopefully in cooperation with our unions. My worry is that my union is currently obsessed with cozying up to Starmer and worrying about anti-Semitism in things like the Big Lie and the weaponite, the Asa Winstanley book that's just come out. I mean, this is ridiculous. They've been subverted. They've done exactly what the campaign against anti-Semitism wants them to do, and is getting loads of money out of the Israel government to do. And they've fallen into the trap. And I'm disgusted with them, frankly. However, I will take this stuff back to my union and see if we can't get something moving, because it's so important. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. Absolutely brilliant contribution as usual. I'm going to bring Paul, it'll be our last speaker from the floor. Paul, over to you. I'm going to add you into the discussion.
I was just interested in a bit about AI because I have a slightly different perspective on the question of AI. Despite it's dangerous, I think the real problem is not the AI itself, it's the fact that who had control of the damn thing. Now, if the AI is actually under the control of the working class, the possibility for humanity for the working class is endless. And I say this as a disabled person that likely benefit from the use of AI. We're all used to forms of AI in our laptops and mobile phones and everything. It's all AI. It's just a very low level version of AI at the moment. But I do think there are possibilities that are endless. But it's the question of getting the working class to control it. That's my point. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Paul. I just want to say thank you so much, Bob, and thank you so much, Steve, for being here and initiating such a brilliant discussion on so many important topics.